In the early hours of December 24th, 1945, just as Christmas Eve quietly slipped into Christmas Day, a devastating fire erupted at the Sauter family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia. It was approximately 1:30 a.m. when the blaze first began to consume the wooden structure. Inside, George and Jenny Sauter lay asleep along with their 9 children, unaware of the horror about to unfold. The silence of the night was shattered when George was awakened by the acrid scent of smoke and the faint but unmistakable sounds of crackling flames. Reacting quickly, he managed to wake Jenny and gather the 4 children who were sleeping on the lower floor. In a panic, they all rushed out of the house, gasping in the cold winter air as flames began to claw their way through the wooden frame of their home. However, 5 of their children, Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jenny, and Betty, were still upstairs, sleeping in the 2 bedrooms on the second floor. With time slipping away and the fire rapidly spreading, George made a desperate attempt to re-enter the burning house in order to save them. But tragedy struck when he realized that the staircase leading to the upper floor had already been engulfed and destroyed by the fire. The wooden steps, now reduced to charred debris, made it utterly impossible to reach his children through the usual way. Driven by fear and sheer determination, George scrambled to find another way back inside, his mind racing, heart pounding, but the odds were turning against him. The fire raged on, sealing off every route, while the fate of the 5 children upstairs grew increasingly uncertain. George then ran outside to grab a ladder he had kept nearby. But to his shock, the ladder was not in its usual place, and despite searching extensively, he couldn't find it. So, he tried using one of his coal trucks to climb up and break through the second-floor glass window. But due to the extreme cold, both coal trucks refused to start. He also had a water barrel that could have helped extinguish the fire, but again, due to the cold, the water inside was frozen. George then attempted to scale an outer wall to reach the upper window, but not only did he fail, he also injured his hand on the glass. Meanwhile, 19-year-old Marion, one of the 4 children who had escaped, ran to a neighbor's house to call the fire department, but no one answered the call. Another neighbor also tried calling from his own telephone, but got no response either. He then drove to the fire department office to ask for help. There he met Fire Chief F.J. Morris and explained the situation, urging him to send help as soon as possible. Back at the Sauter home, George and the others could do nothing but watch their house burn, exhausted from trying every possible solution. The fire department only arrived at 8 a.m., nearly 45 minutes after the house had completely burned down, despite being located just 4 kilometers away. There were reasons for this delay. World War II had just ended a few months earlier, and most of the workforce was still in rest mode. Moreover, it was Christmas Eve. Firefighters at the time didn't have sirens or advanced technology. When someone called the fire department, a person had to manually pick up the call and then physically go door to door to alert the firemen. Chief F.J. Morris later admitted that although he was on duty, he couldn't drive the fire truck himself. Whatever the reason, the reality was that by the time help arrived, the Sauter residence had been reduced to ashes. In the ashes, no remains of the 5 Sauter children could be found. Morris believed the children's bodies may have been completely incinerated in the fire, but this left behind some very strange questions. George Sauter later recounted, with a voice heavy with anguish, that he had stood outside the burning house, shouting desperately toward the upper floor, where his 5 children were believed to be trapped. Again and again, he called out their names, hoping, praying, for even the faintest response, a shadow at the window, a cry for help, any sign that they were still alive. But there was only silence. The flickering flames offered no reply, and the upstairs windows remained eerily still, untouched by movement. His daughter Marion, one of the children who had made it out safely, later shared her own haunting memory in an interview with the Raleigh Register. She too had stood outside, staring up at those same windows with dread, hoping to see her siblings peering out or trying to signal for help. But no faces appeared. Not once did she catch a glimpse of the children through the smoke-stained glass. This unsettling absence raised chilling questions. How could it be that none of the 5 children reacted, screamed, or even stirred in the chaos? Such a complete lack of response could only suggest one of 2 grim possibilities. Either the children had already been rendered unconscious, perhaps by smoke inhalation before the fire ever reached them, or, more disturbingly, they had not been in the room at all when the fire broke out. The twist is that Jenny was the first to see the fire, and according to her, it started near the telephone line and fuse box, which were on the ground floor. So how is it possible that the children sleeping upstairs lost consciousness from a fire that started downstairs, while those downstairs were unaffected? These unanswered questions led George and Jenny to a new conclusion. They began to believe that their children had not died in the fire, but were kidnapped, and the fire was set to cover up the kidnapping. One piece of evidence supporting their theory was that while police investigations blamed faulty wiring for the fire, the Sodders insisted that they had the house wiring checked just recently, and no faults were found. Later investigations also failed to find any solid proof that faulty wiring caused the fire. So, were the Sodder children really kidnapped? To discuss that, we have to look at the history of the Sodder family. George Sodder, the family's head, was originally named Giorgio Soddu and was born in Sardinia, Italy. At the age of 13, he immigrated to America with his older brother. George never liked to talk about why or how he came to the U.S. It's possible that he was involved in some crime or illegal activity in Italy and fled in fear of punishment. After arriving in America, Giorgio, now George, started working in railroad construction in Pennsylvania. He later took up driving work in Smithers, West Virginia, and eventually opened his own trucking company. In Smithers, he met Jenny, whose family was also Italian. They married in 1922 and later moved to Fayetteville, where a large population of Italian immigrants lived. George's trucking business was successful, and he became wealthy and respected in the community. He was known for his strong political opinions, particularly against the Italian dictator Benito Mussolini. Some people supported him, but many others argued with him over his views. It's also important to mention that their second oldest son served in the American military and fought in World War II. He wasn't at home when the fire occurred. It's believed that George's anti-Mussolini stance and his son's service in the American military may have made them targets. There were even multiple warnings. Just months before the fire, a life insurance salesman argued with George and angrily threatened to burn down his house and harm his children. Another man who came for work said George's fuse boxes would catch fire someday. Days before the fire, George's older son noticed a strange car parked along the nearby highway, with someone inside watching his younger siblings as they returned from school, as if keeping tabs on them. Then, there were strange events that night. Around 12:30 a.m., shortly before the fire, a phone call came. Jenny answered, and the voice on the other end was an unknown woman asking for someone Jenny didn't know. Laughter and sounds of a party could be heard in the background. Even the woman laughed oddly. Jenny dismissed it as a prank call. About half an hour later, Jenny was woken again by a sound like something hitting the roof and rolling off. Hearing nothing further, She assumed it was her imagination and went back to sleep. Then, the fire broke out. As mentioned, Jenny first noticed it. Later, when George and Jenny returned to the site with their youngest daughter Sylvia, she found a hard rubber object in the ashes. George said it was no ordinary rubber item. It was a pineapple bomb hand grenade. Perhaps that's what was thrown on the roof that night, which suggests that the fire likely wasn't caused by faulty wiring at all. But the main question remained. If the fire didn't kill the children, then where did they go? According to F.J. Morris, the children's bodies and bones were completely incinerated. But Jenny refused to believe that. She learned from a local crematorium that bones do not turn to ash even after hours of burning, and this fire only lasted 45 minutes. Even household appliances were found partially intact, yet no trace of human bones. So were the children kidnapped before the fire even started? Some reported sightings suggest that might be true. One woman claimed she saw that there were more such claims, but no concrete proof, and the 5 children were never found. By 1947, with no support from authorities, George and Jenny began writing letters to the FBI. One such letter reached Director J. Edgar Hoover, who said he wanted to help, but the case fell outside the FBI's jurisdiction. He had offered help to the local authorities, but the Fayetteville Police and Fire Department declined. With no support from the government, George and Jenny hired a private investigator named C.C. Tinsley. Tinsley discovered that one of the investigators who blamed faulty wiring for the fire was actually the same insurance salesman who had previously threatened George. But no action was taken against the man because George had no evidence of the threats, and accusing someone without proof would have been foolish. In 1949, nearly 4 years after the tragic fire, George Sauter, still clinging to the hope of finding answers, took matters into his own hands once again. Determined to uncover the truth, he brought in a renowned forensic pathologist named Oscar Hunter to conduct a more thorough investigation of the ashes and debris that remained at the site of the Sauter home. The original inquiry had yielded no trace of the 5 missing children, but George wasn't convinced. He believed something had been overlooked. During this second examination, a discovery was finally made. Fragments of a human vertebra were uncovered amidst the scorched earth. For a brief moment, there was a flicker of grim hope. Perhaps this could bring closure, a piece of the puzzle long missing. But when the bones were carefully analyzed, that hope quickly began to crumble. The forensic evaluation concluded that the vertebra belonged to someone between 17 and 22 years old. The problem? The oldest of the missing Sauter children, Maurice, had only been 14 at the time of the fire. This age discrepancy was more than just a minor detail. It strongly suggested that the vertebra could not have belonged to any of the Sauter children. The mystery deepened further when it was revealed that the bones may not have originated from the house at all. Investigators later discovered that the vertebra likely came from Mount Hope Cemetery, located not far from the Sauter property. It appeared the remains had been unintentionally mixed in with the soil that had been brought in during the cleanup or prior landscaping efforts. Instead of offering clarity, the discovery raised even more disturbing questions. If the bones didn't belong to the children, where were their remains? And how did someone else's vertebra end up in the ruins of the Sauter home? For George and Jenny Sauter, this revelation wasn't just another dead end. It was another layer in an ever-growing web of confusion, suspicion, and heartbreak. At this point, police gave up and declared the case closed and unsolved. But the Sauters didn't stop. They printed flyers offering a $55,000 reward for information. In 1952, they even installed a large billboard near the site, showing pictures of the children and their story. George died in 1969, and Jenny passed away in 1989. Only after her death was the billboard taken down. But all these efforts failed, and the Sauter children were never found. To this day, it remains an unsolved mystery. So what do you think? Were the Sauter children really in the house that night? Or were they kidnapped as part of a larger conspiracy?
Don't forget to share your opinion in the comments. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next crime story. Till then, stay safe and stay curious. Thanks for watching.